All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight here at The Volume. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope all of you guys had a great weekend. We are doing another round of preseason reaction today. We're going to be keying in on a couple of teams out of Texas, the Houston Rockets, as well as the Dallas Mavericks. A couple of interesting debuts for new and different looking teams. After that, we're going to talk about the Boston Celtics. They had a game against the Cleveland Cavaliers the other night. Very fascinating game that showed, I thought, the strong basketball culture of both teams, but also was an interesting look at a new era of Celtics basketball that I want to talk about. At the tail end of the show, just a couple of minutes on Lakers Warriors. I just have some thoughts on specifically DeAndre Ayton, as well as the news that LeBron's going to be out to start the season. We haven't had a chance to react to that yet, so we'll have that. Some brief thoughts on the Warriors. And then there's a book that I just finished reading that I'm excited to tell you guys about that I think all Lakers fans should look to get here in the next couple of weeks. You guys know the drill. Before we get started, subscribe to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss show announcements. Don't forget about a podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. It's also super helpful if you leave a rating and a review on that front. Jackson's doing incredible work on our social media feeds on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Make sure you guys follow us there. And last but not least, if you want to get questions in our mailbags, drop them in the YouTube comments and we'll get to them as we progress throughout this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Quick note on the rest of the schedule for this week. We'll have our contender rankings on Wednesday. Friday, we had our first mailbag that we've had in a little bit. Questions based on what I saw in the YouTube comments for the season preview pods. And then next week, we'll have something on Monday, probably just like a prediction, like 5 predictions on the season, something along those lines. And then we're in it, and we're going to be live on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night, which should be a lot of fun. All right, let's talk some hoops. So starting with Houston, we got our first look at the Kevin Durant Rockets against the Jazz last week. I'm trying really hard not to overreact, because it was just the Utah Jazz. But I'm not going to lie, guys, I was super impressed by Houston on both ends of the floor. They still very much had that defense to transition identity. They had a stretch in the second quarter where it was like steal, run out, dunk, steal, run out, dunk, steal, run out, dunk, stop, run out, dunk. And it just was that classic type of run that we're used to seeing from those bench groups with like Tari Easton and Amen Thompson on the floor, just making plays, sparking those transition runouts where their athleticism can be such a strong part of their roster, right? Again, it's preseason against the Jazz. Like a lot of those turnovers were like Svi Mykhailiuk, and you're not going to be going against ball handlers of that quality every night in the Western Conference, but it's still good to see that that identity is still there. The big reason why I'm excited is they were a lot more polished on offense than I was expecting them to look. And again, I'm trying not to get too ahead of myself here. We'll talk about the bigger picture here in a minute, but Şengün looks awesome. He looks poised for a breakout year. I talked last week about how I fear I underrated him in our player rankings. I had him outside of my top 25, and I probably should have had him in that top 25. I looked back at my like all the prep notes that I had, and I had him at 30, which I think is too low. And I just think he looks like he's ready to really go up a level this year. I thought he looked amazing with the offense ran through him. He logged 13 assists to just 1 turnover against the Jazz, making nice kick-out reads out of post-ups. He has incredible chemistry with Amen Thompson. The two of them are running inverted ball screens. He was cutting off of his post-ups and on his rolls. He was feeding him in transition. Like just, I think 5 of his 13 assists that he had in the game were directly to Amen Thompson. Kevin Durant looked very much like a natural fit on both ends of the floor. He missed his first 3 shots, but then he made 7 in a row after that. We saw some looks at the Durant Şengün 2-man game. As you guys could see, Utah did not want to switch. I have a feeling in general teams are not going to want to switch that. That's going to get KD all sorts of opportunities to score, getting downhill and ball screens, as well as opportunities to play make out of those situations. He scored off ball as well, very much in the flow. We're going to talk about Ace Bailey in a minute. And it's so funny because I actually see Ace Bailey in a lot of ways in terms of the fit in an offense. I want to see him attack in similar ways to the way that Kevin Durant does. Very much like tough shot making, but in the flow of the offense, which I think is a very important part of like making you easy to plug and play into any situation. But KD plugs in super nicely into the offense without having to like co-opt the ball away from Şengün or anything along those lines. Amen Thompson got lots of chances to attack off the bounce. And it wasn't perfect. There were a couple plays that went nowhere, but he got into the lane a ton. And when he gets in the lane with the amount of speed that he has, a lot of good things can happen. I really liked his attacks in semi-transition, like before the defense is really set. If he has space and he can get to like a move and a counter move, he's just so athletic that most of these dudes just can't hang with him in space. And you got to see a lot of that. Jabari Smith is shooting the ball super well, which again, like, it's kind of a redundancy. It reminds me of the Lakers where you basically have two power forwards that need to start. But Jabari's shooting is so immensely valuable in this system that desperately needs shooting that I actually think it's going to work. Obviously, there's some things they're going to have to figure out in terms of how to guard against certain types of teams that can really space them out with speed. We'll see. There are going to be different types of matchups that they play. Because when you have Şengün, Durant, and Jabari Smith, not a ton of foot speed on that front line, but they'd be able to counter that with switching and having your help set up, funneling in the right direction, and just having really strong off-ball principles, right? So, like, I think there's some parts that they're going to have to work out, but Jabari's shooting is just too valuable in that group, a group that needs shooting. Reed Shepherd, it's interesting. His on-ball reps weren't that good, like as a creator, but I thought he defended like super super well. Like I've been really impressed by Reed Shepherd's just activity on defense, the speed he puts on his closeouts to chase guys off the line, his ability to slide and stay in front of the ball and on ball situations and slap down at the basketball without fouling. It's funny because I don't think he's even close to being ready to handle the on ball stuff that this team needs. But I do think he's the perfect guy to start with this group simply because what he is right now is a high floor 3-and-D option. He's going to hit his catch and shoots when they're open, and he's a guy that can guard the ball. So I actually think in the meantime, he does give them a really good fit with that starting lineup. And just in order, it's just one of those things where when you're talking about a potential championship ceiling, like contending with the OKCs and the Denvers of the world, that's where it gets a little more complicated and you start to think you need a better ball handler there. And maybe he becomes that one day. I just don't think he's going to be there this year. But I do see a lot of strong, like foundational stuff as an on-ball defender, an off-ball defender, and as an off-ball scorer. Again, I'm not going to allow myself to have like a super passionate opinion about the Rockets here because we just need to see more. Like there will be teams that can really protect the rim, that will sag off of the right guys, and that will make life difficult for this offense. I do want to see what that looks like. But my gut feeling after watching that game was that I overestimated how much the loss of Fred VanVleet would hurt this team. And if they go into next week and they look great in their first 5 games or so, it's not going to take me much to vault them up to the top of that second tier of contenders in the Western Conference. I was really, really impressed by how they looked. But again, we'll see after we get some more data against some better competition. Quick thoughts on Ace Bailey. 19 for 29 so far from the field in preseason. I've loved how Utah's used him. They're basically channeling his aggression and his tough shot making into structured offense. Like he's being hyper aggressive, but almost all of it is coming with an advantage. Like curling off ball screens. So he has really simple reads. Big doesn't step up, go all the way to the rim. Big is, kind of conceding the pull up, but waiting on you to drive. Take the little short jump shot, right? They dig down off the wing, make the kick out. It makes very simplified reads for him. He's taking threes off of like relocations and in transition, so they're pretty good looks from three. Even his tough shot making is coming in the flow of the offense. He hit this like left shoulder fade against the Jazz that came off of a baked in driving lane that I thought was a classic example of what I'm talking about here. So he's on the left wing. I can't remember who has the ball. I think it's like Keontae George or someone like that. And he's on the left wing, and his man is digging down into nail help. So just imagine him standing there on the wing with the defender on his right side, pretty far off of him, right? Swing pass comes to him. What do we talk about all the time on swing passes on nail help? There's a baked-in driving lane. You don't need to do anything or make some sort of complicated read. Catch and rip because the defender's sprinting off your other side. So, like, he's not squared up with you where you've got to make a move to beat him. The move is already, the window, the driving lane is already there. It's the left-handed rip. And so he catches on the wing and he rips left. And the defender who's guarding him makes a super aggressive recovery move back towards the left-handed drive, which easily sets up the spin over his left shoulder, and he gets tons of separation and knocks down a short little like 12-foot left shoulder fadeaway. That's a tough shot, like that left shoulder fadeaway. But because it's coming out of an advantage situation, that baked in driving lane pushing to his left, it's actually a much easier shot than if it's one on one, everyone standing around, and he's breaking the dude down off the bounce to get to a left shoulder fade. The defender's probably going to be more physical with him and bump him on his spin a little bit more, which is going to affect his balance. And now he's not going to get as much lift on the turnaround. And that means it's going to put a lot more emphasis on the top of the shot, which makes it more difficult, which makes it less likely that he makes it, right? Like everyone thinks of tough shot making as something that has to be like four guys standing around and staring. Not necessarily. Like you can be a tough shot maker in the flow of offense. I mean, hell, Kevin Durant has literally made a career out of that sort of thing. And so that was the most encouraging thing to me. Like it's early. And obviously, with his shot diet, he's going to have cold stretches. Like Ace is going to have games where he doesn't make shots, and maybe a few games in a row. But in the flow of the offense like this, he's going to get easier shots. That's the like you you look at the Jazz and their decision to draft Ace Bailey is risky, right? Why was it risky? It was risky because the stuff from Rutgers wasn't pretty. The offense and the defensive tape wasn't pretty. There was highlights on the offensive end. There were highlights on the defensive end, but percentage-wise and a lot of the decision-making, it wasn't pretty. Utah made a bet that that was a Rutgers problem, not an Ace Bailey problem. That, hey, we can bring Ace in and have him play serious basketball with real structure, and he's going to thrive. And again, it's super early, but the early returns are that Ace can score the basketball in structured NBA offense. And that to me is super encouraging. But I mean, if you're a Jazz fan, this is where it gets super exciting. I thought he was amazing on defense. And like when you're a tough shot maker, there's going to be games where you don't make shots. And if you're a bad defensive player who has a night where you're missing shots, it can be destructive for your team. But if you're a guy who has a high defensive floor and you're competing in the margins and you have a rough shooting night, that's still a good game. And then when you have the strong defensive foundation and you're knocking down shots, that's when you're contributing at an all-star level. He started the game on KD, and it was the on-ball stuff in particular that impressed me. He started the game on KD, and he's like sidling up over the top of screens and applying real back pressure on KD, forcing him into some pretty tough pull-up jump shots. At first, I was like, okay, well, KD's slower. What about a quicker player? Well, he gets Amen Thompson on a ball screen, and he like beats over the top of the screen, stays on Amen Thompson's side, waits for him to expose the ball, and slaps the ball away off of his leg. And I'm sitting there watching it, and I'm like, this is like a legitimate defensive talent that we're seeing come together focused in an on-ball role. Now, we'll see how does it go when he goes against teams that are better at screening. How does it go when he's in situations where he's taxed more off the ball? There's a lot more that goes into defense than just guarding pick and roll on the ball. But when I was watching that, I was like, man, like if he can score the basketball in the structure of NBA offense and he can guard the ball at various different types of ball handling talents, that's like a really high level talent there. And it's just exciting for the Jazz because the Jazz just, they needed a bit of real optimism, like a guy who was truly capable of being a franchise altering talent. I'll admit, I was skeptical after the pick. I've said it on the show. The stuff from Rutgers wasn't pretty. But like I actually see a little glimmer of hope now, a real glimmer of hope that exists in the form of Ace Bailey as like a franchise altering talent for Utah. And that was really, really exciting to watch. KD spoke very highly of him after the game as well. Today's show is brought to you by our new presenting sponsor, Hard Rock Bet. The NBA season is right around the corner, and we're incredibly excited. Haven't placed your first bet yet? Now is the perfect time. Bet $5, and if it wins, you don't just get your payout, you also cash in $150 in bonus bets on top. If you're looking to bet NBA futures, they're live on Hard Rock Bet. You can bet on the finals, MVP, Rookie of the Year, Sixth Man, and a lot more. Open up the app to see everything that's live and lock in today's odds if you like what you see. And on Wednesdays, if you're already betting on the Hard Rock Sportsbook app, You know what that means. It's the last day to use your legendary rewards drops. Open up the app today. You can have a bonus bet, or who knows what's in there. More drops every Thursday. The rewards and promos are nonstop. Download the Hard Rock Bet app today and make your first deposit. All right, let's go a little bit further north to the Dallas Mavericks. This was one of the teams that I was most excited to watch in preseason because they have such an interesting configuration. And there was a lot of buzz coming out of the Oklahoma City game because they thrashed them in the first half. And so I went this morning and I watched the first half of both of their games against Oklahoma City and against Charlotte. And there was a ton of interesting stuff to get into. So I want to start with Cooper Flagg because he's the guy who's giving Dallas fans so much to be excited about, right? The most impressive thing by far with Cooper is just his ability to make reads on both ends of the floor. He's a playmaker. He'll jump a passing lane for a steal and spark a fast break and then make a great read for an open three or for a layup. He'll make a backside rotation and block a guy at the rim that leads to a fast break that leads to a lob dunk for Anthony Davis. He'll slide his feet one-on-one. He had a play against Colin Sexton where he beat him to the spot, stonewalled him so hard that literally Colin just lost control of the basketball and it sparks a break going the other way. That's a defensive playmaking that comes from his IQ in combination with his supreme physical gifts compared to most people his size. And then on offense, he just takes the reads that are available to him. And this was something that stood out to me in his Duke tape as well as its summer league. He doesn't overcomplicate things. He probes the defense with the dribble or coming off of screening action, whatever it is. And when he probes the defense, he just takes what's there. If there's an open kick out, he throws it. If there's a drop off, he throws it. If there's a guy trailing the play, he'll hit the trailer. He just takes the easy pass and then he relocates out and gets ready to get the basketball again. Like, he's the definition of a wheel greaser for an offense. I think we'll see some offenses down the line in his career when he's really surrounded by lots of talent where that particular trait comes to the forefront and he really greases the wheels for a great offense. I mean, we saw a version of that in 2024 with Jayson Tatum with the Celtics, where he was around a ton of talent, and he's kind of like the perfect star for that talent because he just keeps the ball moving by making simple reads, right? And like that, I think the level of read and react play that we're seeing from Cooper Flagg is basically unheard of for rookies. And I've just been super impressed by his floor game over the course of the first couple of preseason games that he's played. He's actually second on the team in assists so far behind D'Angelo Russell. The jump shot looks amazing, albeit small sample, obviously. He's only taken 9 of them. But he's 5 for 9 overall, and 8 of those 9 were off the dribble. He's 5 for 8 on off-the-dribble jump shots. He's 2 for 4 from the mid-range overall. He's 3 for 5 from 3. He's showing it in all sorts of situations, like he's hitting pull-up threes in ISO. Guy sagging off, he just kind of takes a hop step and elevates, knocks down the jump shot. In ball screens, going to his left against drop against Oklahoma City, he hits a pull-up 3. Going to his right against drop against Charlotte, he hits a pull-up 3. That's that combo footwork going both ways off of ball screens that you need to hit. He had a couple of really high-level mid-range ISO jump shots in the Charlotte game. One behind-the-back move against LaMelo, hard drive to the left, snatch dribble back, just sheds LaMelo off and just elevates and knocks down that little jump shot moving towards his right. Did it again, not off of a pullback dribble, but off of just like a one dribble pull up, push dribble to the right against Miles Bridges. You can tell kind of like Devin Booker, like there's some of these a lot of right-handed shooters are more comfortable going towards their left. I personally am more comfortable going towards my left, especially when I'm running into a shot. It's just easier footwork to plant that right foot and then your left foot. But there are certain players that, for whatever reason, are more comfortable going to their right as a right-handed player. Devin Booker's talked about this a lot. He talks about how it's about his elevation. He really gets lift because he knows he needs to square up in midair. And so it just engages his lower body more on the shot, and he can rise up and knock those shots down. It kind of feels similar for Cooper Flagg. It seems like he's more comfortable going aggressively towards his right and then just left, right, plant, get as much elevation as he can and rise up and knock down the shot. Again, obviously it's early and all eyes will be on the jump shot for Cooper, but a really good start for him in preseason. He's just going to be an awesome player for a long time. And I'm very happy for Mavs fans because they just had the year from hell, and Cooper, I'm sure, takes some of the sting off of that. Looking at the team on both ends is a little more mixed results for me. Let's start with the defense. I'm a big believer in Dallas's defense in the big picture. I would be stunned if Dallas was like healthy this year and they weren't in the top 6 or 7, but I think they got some work to do to get there. I was skeptical after the first half against Oklahoma City, just simply because Oklahoma City is devoid of offensive talent once you get off of their stars, right? Like the shooting and ball handling talent in OKC just isn't there compared to other teams in the league after their stars. It's a big part of why I'm not as high on them as some of my peers in the business. Like I still view them as a top tier contender, but I don't I don't view them as a runaway favorite the way that some people in the business do coming into the season. And when I watched that game, it just looked a lot like Oklahoma City's bad offensive players trying to score over trees, right? Because Dallas is so huge, right? Charlotte provided a very different challenge, right? You have a real offensive engine talent in LaMelo Ball. You have some talented shooting and finishing talent off the ball. And LaMelo just fried him up. He fried the Mavericks in that game. He had a 142 offensive rating, the Hornets had in 23 minutes when LaMelo was on the floor. That's obviously nightmarish for Dallas's defense. And I want to start on LaMelo for a second. It's funny because we just did our season preview on Charlotte, and I talked about how I'm kind of out on LaMelo as a franchise cornerstone. He's just his injury history, and there's a general air of unseriousness with him, which I think is tough to build a team around. But I remain a huge believer in like his natural talents as an offensive engine in this league. And boy, did LaMelo demonstrate that in this game. He picked the Mavs apart with pull-up threes and floaters in the lane and driving layups through traffic where he's like weaving through 2 7-footers and getting left-handed reverse layups. He was absolutely demolishing Max Christie in this game, like taking it personal. He wanted to kind of humiliate him in this game. Beautiful pass after beautiful pass. He never seems to miss a read. He always seems to put the perfect touch and location on his pass to set his teammates up to score. There's one with Brandon Miller. I think it was an offensive rebound, and LaMelo catches up on the left wing, and Brandon kind of flashes to the middle of the floor. And LaMelo, like, throws the ball high and towards the rim, basically leading Brandon in his catch into a layup. And I was like, that's a little thing where, like, if he just throws him the ball there, that's probably a 15-foot jump shot. And that has a roughly 50% chance of going in, right? But by leading him to the basket with the pass, it actually led to a layup. These are the kinds of little things that like the transcendently great passers in the league are always so good at. The touch on that beautiful lob pass he threw to Miles Bridges on the back cut. Like he's just such a gifted offensive player. And it's funny because LaMelo can really transform me into a grouchy old man who's yelling from the porch sometimes, and I hate that, but at the same time, I'm not a denier of his talent. The talent is real. It's just a question of can he start to become the type of serious player that builds a competitive culture for a Charlotte team that's been bad? And can he stay on the floor? Those are the two things that he needs to address in order to really in order for me to like believe in him as a franchise altering talent again. But really, going back to Dallas, what LaMelo and the Hornets exposed in this phase of Dallas's defensive development was their lack of attentiveness and effort and quickness on the perimeter. The interior defense is going to be ridiculous. We've seen sequences where it seems like they have 4 rim protectors on the floor and no one can get a shot off. They had a stretch in the second quarter of the Hornets game. In just the second quarter of the Hornets game, they had 5 blocks. Like there's going to be a lot of moments like that where their interior defense is frightening. That's going to be easy for them. But they do have a lot of work to do outside the paint. There's a tendency with bigger interior players versus smaller, quicker perimeter players. There's a tendency with some of those bigger players to give up catch and shoot openings. And we've seen a lot of that so far with Dallas. So, like, for example, simple interchanges or screening actions. Guards, they're so used to guarding dudes who can shoot really well from since they were kids that they're usually up to touch, like they're up on the other side waiting for the guy coming off, and they don't concede easy openings out of those things. Bigs have a tendency to kind of soft switch. Like, yeah, I'm here. If you try to turn the corner, you're going to run right into me. But like, if you want to come off of that dribble handoff and shoot, like I'm going to let you take it. And NBA players are really damn good, and they're going to knock that shot down. It's like there's another level of shooting talent throughout the league compared to what it was like 5-10 years ago, right? And like that's why, you know, when you have more bigs on the floor, you have 4s playing the 3 and 5s playing the 4. They're going to be guarding guys that can shoot better than they're typically used to guarding. And so, you know, that even goes into help defense situations. Guards, they're so used to guarding shooters They'll get a foot in the paint and they'll dig down and they'll sprint out to the perimeter with urgency because they've been guarding shooters their whole life and they just know how to get back out to the perimeter. And like bigs, they have a habit of sagging into the paint to help and like not having that same level of urgency to get back out to the perimeter. And there just were a lot of situations like that where Dallas was giving up pretty easy over the top catch and shoot or off the dribble jump shots because they just weren't bringing that level of perimeter intensity from their front court positions. Overall, in the first half of both of their games, Dallas gave up 40 catch and shoot jump shots just in the first half of the two games. As a team, in both games in total, they're averaging allowing 35 catch and shoot looks per game. That ranks sixth worst in the NBA so far in preseason. That's a big part of that like perimeter intensity that they're going to have to pick up on. And the main culprit here on film has actually been Anthony Davis. And I'm going to try really hard to not overreact here. But in general, I've just been super disappointed in AD to start this training camp. On the one hand, I'm not super surprised because this is exactly what it was like with the Lakers. He'd always come into camp out of shape and unpolished, and it always took forever for him to like really find his groove. But I'm especially disappointed this year just because I thought he'd come out for blood. Like, dude, you just got traded. I thought you'd come into camp in the best shape of your life with a new opportunity, legitimately a better roster than when you last played in Los Angeles. Like probably the best, like overall talented roster you've been on in years. A real opportunity to win the title if Kyrie Irving can come back towards the end of the season, and especially if you hit on some sort of roster balancing trade, and you came into camp fatter than you've ever been. And it hasn't been pretty on film. Like he's bricking jumpers, he's throwing these aimless drives where he just smokes layups and falls on the ground and cries for fouls. On defense, he was legitimately awful against Charlotte. He got fried by Miles Bridges because he just wasn't paying attention to him half the time, botching screen coverages, not being up to touch against shooters. He's just not locked in right now. And again, I know it's just preseason, and I probably sound ridiculous right now, but I just thought we'd see a different version of AD this year. I'm a huge believer in Anthony Davis's ceiling. I've talked about it so many times on the show. I think he was the best defender in the league when he was healthy and locked in before Victor Wembanyama came around. He's like an efficient 26 points per game when he's healthy and locked in on offense. I believe in what he can be and what he is when he's healthy, but this stuff just gets so frustrating. And like, again, one thing I'll say about it's just preseason thing. He looks like this in the regular season sometimes too. And this team is going nowhere fast unless they can get Anthony Davis like locked in, focused, and playing to the level he's capable of. And so I hope this is me just being ridiculous. And I hope that this is AD just coasting in preseason and that he comes out in the regular season and he kicks ass and this Dallas team has something to really show the league. But overall, I just have been disappointed with the level of like conditioning and just engagement from Anthony Davis in the preseason games that I've seen to this point. Maybe it looks way better behind closed doors in camp. I don't know, but I've just been a little disappointed. Overall, with Dallas's defense, though, again, I think they're going to be fine. They just have some work to do. And I think they are going to have some trouble with quick guards. Their backcourt is slow, right? Like D'Lo and Clay, that's not a foot speed machine, right? And even when Max Christie gets in the game, they have him chase over the top. And as soon as Max got caught on the screen and LaMelo got downhill, LaMelo did whatever he wanted, scoring in the mid-range and knifing around bigs in space and getting to the rim, right? So, like, they're going to have to figure something out for that. I think a potential solution there is to do more switching and then just basically have your bigs set up to try to contest pull-up threes. And then if they do get beat on the dribble, like funneling them in a specific direction where your help defense can be a little bit more prepared. But overall, I just think they're pretty far from what they need to be defensively. Like they need to be a truly elite defense in order for Kyrie to come in and make this team a serious championship contender. They have the personnel for it. I do believe they'll get there. I just think right now on the perimeter, they've got some work to do, and Charlotte kind of exposed them a little bit in that particular game. On offense, predictably, they've struggled, but I do like some of the stuff I'm seeing. Like we talked about Cooper Flagg shooting and passing earlier. That's a positive. I haven't loved all of the shots that D'Lo's taken. I think he's been a little too aggressive, but I do think overall you can see how his handling and his playmaking will be high value with this team. Jason Kidd is clearly heavily emphasized bat cutting, which I think is super smart. When you don't have a ton of ball handling and you need to get the ball into the paint, manufacturing penetration with cutting is a great way to do that, as long as you have guys who can pass. And like Derek Lively can pass, Anthony Davis can pass, your bigs can pass pretty well. D'Angelo Russell has hit Max Christie on like 5 back cuts already, right? But you're also seeing some of the clunkiness. Like we talked about earlier, AD right now is not even close to polished enough offensively to play the 4. That's going to be something they're going to have to figure out. He just has to get better. You can see that on his drives. They look kind of aimless, and he looks slow on his drives. His jumper looks nasty right now. The lack of ball handling is forcing guys like Cooper and D'Lo to take some tough shots. That's something that stood out to me early. Like Cooper's taking some tough off the dribble shots. He's hitting them right now, but D'Lo's had to take some too. That's a tough shot diet. And as a team, they just don't have very much shooting. So far through preseason, they're 29 for 91 on all jump shots at just 0.87 points per possession. So teams will eventually just start packing the paint on them. And like even the Oklahoma City game, like they got most of their back cuts in the OKC game because OKC is pressuring and denying. But when a guy denies, it's easy to back cut. But what if the guy doesn't deny and he just sags in the paint? Then those back cuts aren't open, and all of a sudden it's going to be about guys being able to really process an interior passing and knocking down shots over the top, which is a weakness for this particular team, right? One last positive thing that I want to end on, though, they're going to struggle to score, right? Which is why it's important for them to be a top tier defense, like we talked about. But they have looked awesome in transition, and this is the potential for this team. All of their bigs and forwards run the floor super well. And they get so many opportunities to run out because they force a lot of jump shots and they're going to get a lot of blocks and deflections and things like that that lead to runouts. In those situations, they're making great reads. Both Cooper and D'Lo have been great with their passing reads in transition situations. Cooper's made a bunch of his assists have come in transition. D'Lo hit that lob to Cooper in the first half of the Charlotte game. If they are a truly elite top tier defense, and they use that to be a dominant transition team, and Kyrie comes back and polishes them up in the half court a little bit, that's where they become a serious threat out in the Western Conference. All right, let's talk about the Boston Celtics for a little bit. I watched the first half of their game against Cleveland. They went with the Pritchard, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Sam Hauser, Chris Boucher lineup. They used a bigger version of that lineup with Xavier Tillman the last time they played their starters, but I actually like this lineup a lot. In a couple of reasons. Boucher, he brings like that willingness and ability to take and make above the break threes. He took 3 of them in the game and made 2. He's shot them all pretty well in preseason so far. He also just generally brings more like foot speed and switchability to those lineups, and they're going to have to play fast, and they generally are playing pretty fast. And so I think that is something that will fit that starting lineup really well. You could feel that emphasis on transition speed through these Celtics' first couple of preseason games pretty heavily. Right off the bat, though, before we talk about some of the details for the Celtics, I just want to shout out both of these teams for their intensity in this game. Right from the jump, both teams were competing at an insanely high level and playing in a way that was consistent with their identities. And by the way, in case I didn't mention it earlier, I'm talking about the Cleveland game. Both teams came out guarding like crazy and like pressuring the ball. Cleveland's like pressuring all the way up to half court, and Larry Nance is like jumping passing lanes out on like bigs that are flashing for a high post catch. That's a big part of their identity, right? Turner for forcing turnovers and getting out in transition. On offense, Cleveland is like cutting and moving without the ball super well and like running like crazy to get out in transition whenever they can. Boston playing super high level, smart NBA offense, like simple advantage creation, driving closeouts, extending advantages, and knocking down and taking every quality 3 they can get their eyes on. They hung 70 points on the Cavs. And again, like I know they didn't have their usual personnel out there, but they were like that Cavs defense was playing super hard and they were pressuring and flying around in rotation. It wasn't like they were just letting Boston score. I just want to compliment both teams because I think they represent very strong basketball cultures. I know there's this tendency to see a lot of teams kind of going through the motions in preseason, and for us to be like, whatever, like it's fine, it's preseason, it's going to be a long 82 games. This is a marathon, not a sprint, all that shit, right? I personally have never bought into that idea. I recognize it as a human reality. Like every one of the NBA's 30 teams will have nights where their heart just isn't in it. I'm not, denying that as a reality, but I just don't think you can win an NBA championship without a dead serious culture that approaches things day to day with a level of intensity and a desire to get better. There are a few exceptions over the years, repeat champions usually, those that'll like kind of ease their way through the season. But those teams, all those repeat champions, have had huge talent advantages to cover for their lack of intensity. For the most part, you have to be a serious team that from day one of training camp is attacking things in order to get to where you want to go. And what's fascinating to me about these two particular cultures, Boston and Cleveland, is it shows with the roster changes. Boston's missing Jayson Tatum. And from last year, Drew Holiday and Al Horford and Kristaps Porzingis, core parts of that culture. But the Celtics just play basketball a certain way. It's part of who they are as an organization. And that is translated to this year, even with new and different personnel. The Cavs are sitting all their starters, but their basketball culture is so strong that the next dudes in line come out and compete their asses off. Even though they were hopelessly outgunned in terms of talent, they didn't have the shot creation talent to generate good shots in this particular game, right? Like we saw Proctor quite a bit and Porter Jr. and those guys were struggling. But like the team was moving and running and pressuring and denying and flying around and like just playing really good basketball. I think that these two teams represent two of the strongest basketball cultures in that conference. I should add Indiana, the Pacers, to this list as well. Didn't watch that particular game. I don't think their consistent success is an accident. I think it is bred top down by organizational excellence day to day in their process. And I just wanted to shout those teams out. But anyway, really impressed by Boston. I love the defensive pressure on the perimeter. I know they have severe front court limitations. I think we saw that mostly on the glass. Like Cleveland had 21 offensive rebounds in this game. Overall, Boston's defensive rebounding percentage in preseason is 64.3%, which is really bad. That's bottom 6 in the league right now so far through preseason. But that's the reality of the personnel limitations. Jayson Tatum was like a Swiss Army knife that covered a lot of those problems on the glass, and then your center rotation fell off a cliff this year compared to last year, right? But they do have an athletic strength on the roster on the perimeter. And that shows up in their ball pressure, in their ability to force turnovers. Like they forced 21 turnovers so far per game in preseason, which is awesome. It also helps in their ability to fetch long rebounds, right? Like you shoot a lot of threes, which means a lot of long rebounds, and their foot speed can win those battles for long rebounds. And so for all their defensive rebounding struggles, the Celtics have grabbed 39% of their own misses to make up for it. So like that's going to be a margin where they're going to have some success. A lot of encouraging stuff on offense, though. Like Peyton Pritchard looks amazing and poised for a breakout season in a starting role. He lit up the Cavs to start this game. Anthony Simons has shot the ball well, and he's competing on defense. Like he's trying. He's pressuring the ball. He's doing, at least trying to do what Mazzulla is asking him to do. My one big disappointment with Anthony so far is that he hasn't generated much dribble penetration yet. It's something that I was hoping he'd bring to the table, and he seemed to kind of retreat against ball pressure and want to attack ball pressure with like aggressive step back moves to get the threes instead of like beating those dudes off the dribble. But it's early. We'll see if that changes in a larger sample. Jaylen Brown's been pretty mediocre so far, actually. It looked like the Cleveland game was like moving too fast for him, which is obviously strange. And we know Jaylen Brown, the game doesn't move too fast for Jaylen Brown. He's fine. It's just a sign that he's probably a bit too relaxed right now. And I think that will change as he gets into the flow of the season. But overall, I'm encouraged about Boston as a middle tier Eastern Conference team. They have one of the more talented perimeter cores in the conference. They have extremely strong basketball culture, which will help them on the margins. Like whatever margin they lose with their lack of front court talent, it will be mitigated to a certain extent by strong modern fundamentals, ball pressure, transition pushes, high value shot profile, threes and layups, right? Strong offensive rebounding, winning the possession battle, or at least counteracting some of the possession battle problems they'll have on the other end of the floor. I think Celtics fans will really enjoy rooting for this team. By the way, if you missed our full season preview, you can find that on the Hoops Tonight channel under Atlantic Division Season Preview. You can find that there. I also did a hour-long season preview with Adam Taylor, a friend of mine who covers the Celtics in the UK. We went into extreme detail on every Celtics storyline, including all their position groups. You can find the link to that podcast, Adam's podcast, on my Twitter feed. If you go back to October 8th, you'll find that I tweeted out the link there. All right, quick thoughts on Lakers Warriors. I'm only going to go a couple minutes here, and then I want to tell you guys about a new book that I recommend. So on the Lakers front, we got a really good look at the value of DeAndre Ayton's short range scoring. We got a good, like, high volume sample of Austin Reeves, DeAndre Ayton pick and roll in this game. And he also ran quite a few handoffs with Jake LaRavia and Dalton Connect. And so Ayton got a lot of catches in the middle of the floor, and he showed it all there. Catch and shoot mid-rangers at the elbow, turnarounds over his right shoulder out of the post, floaters in the lane. He's just going to be such an important release valve for this team there in the middle of the floor. Like, the vertical spacing piece, you could tell they struggle to get, even Austin struggles to kind of find the lob angles for him. It's going to be a Luka thing. Luka's going to be the guy that really unlocks DeAndre as a, like, above the rim vertical spacer. But he's going to be a release valve for everybody in the middle of the floor. Think like Isaiah Hartenstein. Think like what Jared Allen does for the Cavs. The ability to do that, like, short range to, like, short mid-range scoring. That's a release valve for these guys. When they get into the lane, they could pitch it back, and Ayton can just elevate over the top and knock down a short shot, which can be a real ceiling raiser for that offense. I also thought his short roll reads were solid last night. Like this was an area that I had concern with Ayton watching the film. Was like, is he going to be able to make the short range reads? And like last night, again, one game, just preseason, but I thought he was really good in the middle of the floor last night, making, like, patiently waiting for the opening on the weak side and making the right kickouts. He had just 5 assists to 1 turnover in that game. He had 8 rebounds and 3 stocks in just 26 minutes. A really nice night from Ayton, and a good representation of how much better he is than the centers that were playing for the Lakers after the Anthony Davis trade last year. Austin looked great again. Only real concern with him is he appeared to tweak his ankle on the weird kind of transition collision with Brandon Pajemski, so hopefully Austin's all right. Jared Vanderbilt missed all 4 of his threes, but I still like the way the release looks, and he does look amazing athletically. He had 2 drives to the rim, one where he made a layup and one where he missed a layup but got his own putback, that were super athletic plays, and just a reminder that he's a different player than the guy that we saw last year playing for the Lakers. The news, of course, though, is that LeBron is going to be out to start the season with sciatica. It looks like that can arise from something in the muscle or something in the back. I'm not sure which of the two he's specifically dealing with, but from what I hear, it can be pretty debilitating. And so obviously it's a huge bummer. My first thought when that happened was like, oh man, I hope this isn't the beginning of the end. But secondly, even though we can acknowledge that this Lakers team has no championship ceiling without LeBron, even though it was a thin window to begin with, I'm reasonably optimistic about the Lakers' ability to compete in the regular season and just stay afloat for a month or two without him. And one of the reasons why is because the one position where they are redundant with starting level talent is the power forward spot. They don't have a starting caliber 2-way wing that can play the 2 or the 3, but they have like 3 dudes who can play the 4, right? And 2 of them at a starting level in LeBron James and Rui Hachimura, right? And so I actually kind of see it in a strange way, kind of like landing into a Vando Rui 3-4 setup. Because on the one hand, you need a guy who can guard the ball to start every game. That's something that Jared Vanderbilt can do at an extremely high level, right? You got to have someone that can guard 4s, be a low man, help defensive rebound, that sort of thing. Rui can do that job. When he's at the 3 and he's asked to cover on the perimeter more, it can be exposed as a major weakness for Rui. But at the 4, it's actually a more achievable defensive role for him. He's been on the record in training camp and in media appearances saying, my natural position is the 4. And so I look at like Austin, Luka, Rui, Vando, and Ayton as a lineup that makes some sense to me. For starters, like that's the luxury of having a guy like Austin. You know, like when it was the Anthony Davis configuration of the team, he was so important as a primary shot creator on the floor alongside LeBron. But then you brought Luka into the equation, and in many ways, Austin was marginalized a bit, right? But with LeBron being out, it's like all of a sudden Austin's ability to like run high volume pick and roll with DeAndre Ayton is super valuable. That's a real value add for this team, a luxury to have a guy like Austin Reeves, right? You have a guy who can guard the ball in Jared Vanderbilt. You have weak side scoring and pick and roll scoring in the form of Rui Hachimura and DeAndre Ayton. You have two high level shot creators. Obviously, they're not going to be as good as if they had LeBron. And we have a question in our mailbag on Friday that has to deal with like what the starting lineup should look like when they're healthy. And we'll talk about that when we get there. But like that is a lineup that makes some sense. And then you go to the bench and it's like Gabe Vincent is a guy that, ideally you don't want him to be your third best ball handler, but he can be the third best ball handler for a month when you need him to, right? In a regular season context. Jake LaRavia is a solid wing to bring off the bench. Obviously, you have Jackson Hayes and Marcus Smart. Like, it's not a team that's going to go rip off and go 10-2 over a 12-game span. That's not what I'm saying. But can they stay afloat in the Western Conference and have LeBron come back when they're 10-8 and, 2 games back of the 3 seed? Like, yeah, I think they can. I think that's something that they can do. And so, in a weird way, I'm bummed about the LeBron news, but like it literally doesn't make sense for LeBron to come back until he's 100% recovered. The Lakers have the pieces to be just a coherent basketball team without him right now. They only have value in LeBron as like a top tier, as a second team All NBA type of guy that he was last year. That's the level he's got to be trying to get back to. So I think it makes sense for LeBron to just take his time until he's 100% recovered. On the Warriors front, we got a steady diet of on-ball Kuminga in this one with Steph out. It was pretty rough. He was a turnover machine. There were some bright spots. Like he had some quick, efficient ISO attacks, like some baseline drives and post-ups. He hit Pat Spencer on an inverted ball screen for a layup that I thought was an impressive read. And, we've seen a little bit of that with Steph where him and Steph have some of that two-man game chemistry where Steph will screen for him. But he came off and Pat Spencer slipped into the lane and Kuminga just rifled the pass up high where only Pat can get it. Pat caught it and got a layup. Really nice game from Brandon Pajemski. He found a nice rhythm in ball screens in the second half, started to hit like his pull-up jump shot as guys were sagging off him. He found real good rhythm with his jump shot, made quality kick-out reads when he got down into the lane as the Laker defense reacted to him. He was kicking out to the right guys on the perimeter. It's funny because I was on a Light Years playback video that they had last week. And Sam Esfandiari asked me, he goes, which one of the young players do you think has the most pressure between, guys like Moses Moody and Jonathan Kuminga and Brandon Pajemski? And I actually think it's Brandon because, for all of the needs that they have for Moses at that position, really they just need him to guard the ball and to knock down catch and shoot jump shots and to make decent reads. That's all they need from Moses Moody. They need him to be, 75% of what Andrew Wiggins has been over the course of previous seasons. And like that's like a really achievable goal for Moses Moody. And if he lands 70% instead of 75% of that player, it's not going to dramatically shift the fortunes of the team. But like that type of player, that like secondary perimeter scorer off of Steph Curry has been a absolute necessity over the years when the Warriors have competed for championships. Whether it was Jordan Poole in 2022 who would come in and lead units, whether it was Kevin Durant in 2017 and 2018, whether it was Klay Thompson and Sean Livingston and Leandro Barbosa in 2015. Like they need reliable scoring in the backcourt off of Steph Curry. Now, there's a more complicated conversation to have, like Sam aptly pointed out, like, well, what the hell are we paying Jimmy Butler $60 million for if he's not going to be that guy? But like to me, I look at Jimmy Butler as more of like a do a little bit of everything kind of guy and not a pure scorer in the simplest sense of the term. Now, if Jimmy can get to the point where he's averaging 25 points per game for a playoff run, then yeah, now we need to start having a serious conversation about the Warriors as like a real threat to hoist the trophy. But like, I look at Jimmy as like a do everything kind of guy, not as like the purest form of a bucket getter in the modern NBA, right? And so like there is some pressure on Brandon Pajemski to be a guy who can run the offense and score the ball a little bit. And so there's real pressure on him that I don't think exists for a guy like Moody, who's basically a 3-and-D guy, or for Kuminga, who, it's kind of like whatever you get from him, you get from him. He doesn't really fit in the big picture of the team, and they're trying to trade him, right? So, like, I thought that was a good sign from Brandon Pajemski. He played really well to end the season last year, got a bunch of touches last night, and ran the offense well when he did, especially when he found that groove there in the second half. Some encouraging stuff from Brandon Pajemski there. All right, before we get out of here today, I just wanted to talk briefly about this Lakers book. Again, I'm not getting paid to say this. I just really think Lakers fans would enjoy this book. The book is called A Hollywood Ending by Yaron Weitzman. You can pre-order it right now on Amazon. It's officially releasing on opening night on October 21st. But he was kind enough to send me a copy early, and I finished reading it last week. And to put it very simply, if you are a Lakers fan who rooted for this team, for the LeBron Lakers, you absolutely have to read this book. Yaron went to incredible trouble to conduct over 250 interviews to basically piece together a remarkably detailed behind the scenes look at everything that happened over those years. And if you're a fan who rooted for the Lakers during that era, it's a fun trip down memory lane. Like, you'll remember the highs, like the dominant 2020 season. There's a lot of fun details from that stretch, but it's also super frustrating to like learn about the insanity that led to their downfall in the years after that, or some of the incompetence in general in the organization. It's a fun trip down memory lane because you get to experience all those emotions again, the good and the bad, right? It's also super informative. You get detailed backstory for all the major characters in this kind of saga, right? Like the Buss family and the role of certain people in the organization, like Tim Harris and Kurt Rambis, who for whatever reason was like shoehorning himself into every coaching staff over the years. And like you learn about Rob Pelinka's background, why he may or may not have the reputation he does around the league, Rich Paul's upbringing, why he's wired the way he's wired, Anthony Davis. Like, you just get a ton of perspective on everything, a ton of behind the scenes looks at like the process of major Lakers decisions, like how they ended up with Russell Westbrook, the fact that he was actually their third option that summer and kind of a fallback in many ways from the type of player they were looking for, how they lost guys like Brooke Lopez and Alex Caruso. I don't want to spoil the book because it's such a great read, and it just, there's a lot of detail that you get if you read it. But I just highly recommend you guys order it. It's not an overly long read. It's not going to take up the entire year. It's just a amazing recount of everything that a recap of everything that happened over the course of that era, and it was definitely a great read. I'll give you guys, it'll, like, to put it simply, it'll give you guys some closure on what it was like rooting for the LeBron Lakers over these years. Again, A Hollywood Ending by Yaron Weitzman. It releases next Tuesday. You guys can pre-order it right now on Amazon. All right, guys, that's all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us and supporting the show. We will be back on Wednesday with our contender rankings, and then we'll have a mailbag on Friday. I will see you guys then.